Hello, Chris. Am I to assume that we are ready to start?
I'm sorry, y'all. We're having a slight technical difficulty. Bear with us for just a quick moment.
No problem. Just let me know.
Hello, I'm Chris Burrell, president of the Magic City Bar Association. Thank you so much for joining us for this final installment of our social distancing CLE series. This has been a great year for the Magic City Bar, and it's all because of committed members just like you. At the conclusion of the CLE, be sure to do 3 things. First, submit feedback so you can get credit for attending the CLE. Second, renew your membership. Third, send an email to 5 friends asking them to join or renew as well. Lastly, be sure to join us for our annual meeting later this afternoon so you can be in the know about what's going on with your organization. We will now turn it over to our CLE presenters. Happy holidays.
Well, hello and greetings, friends and members of the Magic City Bar Association. I am Eugene Verin, a retired senior circuit judge for the 10th Judicial Circuit, Bessemer Division here in Jefferson County. More importantly, I am presently the chairman of the board of this great association. The purpose of this leadership forum presentation is to equip present and future association leaders with the tools that they need to successfully run the association in a professional and ethical manner. We hope to do this by providing this it's a one-on-one course level overview of how the association is currently constituted and operates. We especially want to point out what is required under the association's bylaws, policies, and the statutes of the state of Alabama. I do encourage you to fully review the association's bylaws and policies. And if you do not have a copy, perhaps our president can provide you with one while we make this presentation. And if he can't, if he will email me at some point while I'm not speaking, I'll be more than happy to provide you with one as well. The Magic City Bar Association was incorporated in 1984 after a year-long organizing effort. A partial history of the association can be found on the website, and I invite you to review it at your leisure. So now let's fast forward from 1984, some 30 plus years to 2017. A group of the association's past president, led by Sam Fisher, spearheaded an effort to zoom the association into the 21st century. After a year-long effort, new bylaws were adopted by the association during its annual membership meeting held on December the 18th, 2018. These bylaws made significant changes to the operational structure of the association, which one, created a board of directors which exercises specific functions as enumerated in Article 5 of the bylaws, which we will refer to as the Article 5 powers of the board. 2, established an executive committee comprised of the association officers, which governs the day-to-day activities of the association. And 3, included many other provisions which put the association in alignment with the Alabama Nonprofit Corporation Act. It is important for all who wish to serve the association in a leadership role to have a basic understanding and knowledge of our bylaws. Although Alabama Code Sections 10A-3-2.01 subsection B and 2.08 subsection B impose no liability on any member or officer just for being or serving as such. Officer director indemnification may be withheld and liability imposed pursuant to section 10A-3-2.43, quote, in relation to matters as to which he or she shall be adjudged in the suit, in any action, suit, or proceeding to be liable for negligence or misconduct in the performance of his or her duty, end of quote. And despite this section, we all want to do a good job in running this association anyway, because we have pride in what we do. And because of that, we've held leadership forums every year since the enactment of our new bylaws. The first one was held on September the 10th, 2019, for the benefit of the executive committee, which featured Judge Abdul Kalan, Marcus Maples, both of whom had outstanding years of leadership during their tenures as president of the MCBA and Alabama Lawyers Association, respectively, and Barbara Luckett, an MCBA member who's an expert in parliamentarian procedures, because our association does follow the Robert Rules of Order. We held a leadership forum for the membership preceding last year's annual meeting, and of course, we're doing the same this year. And in accordance with our policies, we should hold a leadership forum every year so that incoming officers, committee members, and others have an understanding of how this association operates. For the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to review the principal provisions regarding the board of directors and the executive committee. Then two of our association's ascending officers, Richard Rice, our vice president, who soon will be our president-elect, and Joe Caldwell, our parliamentarian, who soon will be our vice president, will talk to you about the role and responsibilities of our association's officers and committees. I will then come back and review the obligations imposed upon us and the interplay between the board and executive committee. And time permitting, we'll wrap up with our one other ascending officer, Sidney Jackson, who will soon be our president, and our president, Chris Burrell, who will soon be our former president. And I'm sure that he will be glad about that. And they can give you some of the practical tips of leadership and management of this association. And they will have more relevant information than I do, because it's been more than 30 years since I've been president. And we all know that things have changed quite a bit in 30 years. By the end of this initial presentation that I have, you should be able to define what the association's board of directors is, how it's composed and what it does, and distinguish the board of directors from the executive committee and how it's composed and what they do. You should know what an ascending officer is, and you should know what these Article 5 board powers are. So first, let's talk about the board of directors. The board of directors is charged with the overall management of the business and affairs of the association in accordance with chapters 1 and 3 of Title 10A of the Code of Alabama, the Alabama Nonprofit Corporation Law, and Article 4 of the general provisions of the bylaws. The board of directors is composed of 3 classes of directors: appointed directors, ex officio directors, and directors emeriti. Ex officio directors are elected to the board directly or indirectly by the general membership. These are the officers of the association: the president, president-elect, vice president, parliamentarian, recording secretary, corresponding secretary, treasurer, and Magic City Bar representative to the Birmingham Bar Association. These ex officio directors generally serve a one-year term of office, and all are voted upon by the general membership during the association's annual meeting, except for the president, president-elect, and vice president. These three, along with the parliamentarian, are what we call ascending officers. That is, they automatically ascend or move up to the next higher office. The parliamentarian automatically ascends to the vice presidency. The vice president automatically ascends to the office of president-elect, and the president-elect automatically ascends to the presidency. There is no vote of the membership required for this action to take place. Once again, all of these officers, from the president to the Magic City Bar representative to the BBA, are members of the association's board of directors, and these are designated as our ex officio directors. The next category of directors are the appointed directors. I'm going to quote for the bylaws in terms of their qualifications. Each appointed director shall be any of the following: 1, an individual who has served as a past president or president-elect. 2, an individual who has been a member in good standing of the association for at least 10 years preceding his or her election to the board. Or 3, an attorney or judge who has served as a judge or resided in Jefferson County, Alabama for at least the 15 years preceding his or her election, and has been a member in good standing of the association for at least the 5 years preceding his or her election. Appointed directors serve a term of 3 years, and they are elected by vote of the board of directors. There should be, in accordance with the bylaws, at least 12 appointed directors serving in 3 distinct classes, having 3 years staggered terms of office. And so I just wanted to tell you, during our initial setup during our new bylaws in 2019, I was elected to serve as the board chairperson. We had 4 Class 1 directors. We had 4 Class 2 directors. And we had 20 Class 3 directors. And in 2020, we had 4 Class 2 directors, 20 Class 3 directors, and 5 Class 1 directors. And there was 1 director that was added on because our new policy dictated that the immediate past president is elevated to the board of directors and serves a full 3-year term. Presently, every past president of the Magic City Bar, except 2 that could not be located, has agreed and presently serve as an appointed director. There's only 1 appointed director who is not a past president, and that is Judge Charles Price. Based on the premise that we want the board to engage in big, long-range projects, we deemed it important to gain the support of all of our past presidents under our revamped bylaws. And that's because we wanted to have a big show of support when we implemented some of our big projects. And I'll detail some of those in a minute. There's a downside to having a very large board. And that is that it requires a very large quorum requirement. While a simple majority vote during a board meeting will pass any pending motion, the bylaws requires there to be 3/5 attendance of appointed directors to constitute a quorum. Thus, with our present number of 29 appointed directors, we have to have 17 of them attend a meeting in order for any official action to be taken. And that has not been a problem so far, but it is not always easy to get those numbers of directors to attend a meeting. It is anticipated that when the 20 Class 2 directors are up for election in 2022, that the top 4 vote getters will serve on the board thereafter, and that will put the board's membership numbers more in line with the minimum number of 12 appointed directors as stated in the bylaws. So instead of having 29, 30 appointed directors, in addition to the officers, ex officio board members, we'll scale it down to a more manageable number. Our new bylaws are an amazing document, which in my opinion, should be rarely modified. But no document is perfect. After their adoption, we noticed that certain provisions were either omitted or needed to be modified. The first paragraph of Article 5 of the bylaws permits the adoption of policies not inconsistent with the bylaws. And during our April 16th, 2020 board meeting, some important policies were adopted relating to the board of directors. For instance, Policy 1 provides that a duly executed proxy is valid for both purposes of voting and determining a quorum. And during some of our board meetings, we have had proxy voting, which helped us with a quorum and with getting business done. And this provision is in line with the provision for our membership, which allows proxy voting during our annual membership meeting. Also, Policy 8 provides that once the association's president concludes his or her term of office, they are automatically elevated to the board of directors for a 3-year term as an appointed director, and I think I've already alluded to that. The bylaws provide that the board has only one officer, the board chairman, who is elected by the entire board of directors and who serves a term of 1 year. However, they provide for no other officers or any committees. So Policy 3 establishes a standing board audit committee and a standing board nominations committee. An interesting thing about the officers and the board chairperson is that the board chairman is deemed to be an officer of the association, but is not on the executive committee. And that was done purposefully, of course. But that also means that the board chairperson, like any other officer, is term limited to 3 years for any term of office. So it's important to note that as well. We also noticed that Article 8 of the bylaws that deals with committees needed some tweaking. It provided for association committees, but 1, it did not make them standing committees, and 2, it did not give the executive committee specific authority to create committees. So policy number 4 corrected this situation, and it also gave the board specific authority to form board committees that exercise Article 5 full board reserve powers. I'd now like to talk about these Article 5 full board reserve powers and their interplay with the executive committee. I've already mentioned that the board of directors is charged with the overall management of the business and affairs of the association. However, the board of directors is mandated to only have one meeting per year, an annual meeting. And as you can imagine, while a lot of important things can get done during that one meeting, it's not conducive to running an association just like ours. Thus, Article 5, titled the Executive Committee, provides that when the board of directors is not meeting, that, quote, an executive committee is hereby created to exercise the power of the board when the board is not meeting. For purposes of clarity, the executive committee shall have control over and generally manage the affairs and business of the association, shall determine the policies of the association, and shall, in general, assume responsibility for the direction of said policies, including the promulgation and adoption of such appropriate guidelines and regulations as it may deem necessary and proper to carry out its duties, and that are not inconsistent with these bylaws, the Articles of Incorporation, and the Alabama Nonprofit Corporation Law, end of quote. So the executive committee runs the day-to-day affairs of the association, except for the 12 enumerated powers that are in Article 5 that must be exercised by the full board of directors. For example, these powers include authorizing any expenditure of $10,000 or more, entering into contracts lasting a year or more, or involving the purchase or lease of real property, and the hiring or termination of the employment of an executive directors. For those types of things, the executive committee run by the association's officers cannot act. There must be a full board meeting comprised of those ex officio board members and the appointed board members in order to do any action with regard to these Article 5 enumerated items. On August the 15th, 2019, during a specially called board meeting, I was authorized to appoint 3 task forces that addressed these Article 5 powers. Justice Ralph Cook was appointed to chair the Capital Fund Task Force to study plans to make the MCBA self-sustaining financially. Deborah Bird Walker and Gail Pugh Gratton were appointed to co-chair the Building Permanent Office Project to study the feasibility of purchasing or leasing a permanent home for the MCBA. And Sam Fisher was appointed to chair the Executive Director Task Force to study the feasibility of hiring an executive director. These 3 task forces were transformed to board committees with the adoption of our policies. And during our last specially called board continuation meeting, the Capital Funding Committee's report was unanimously adopted. And I believe during the annual meeting, which will follow this presentation, we'll have a more in-depth discussion. But basically, under Justice Cook's direction, we've approved, the association has approved that $100,000 be set aside to be placed into an investment fund that will go on for at least 30 years, which if it mirrors past performance of the stock market, will grow to the point of, I believe it's $1.6 million, and which should be able to keep on growing perpetually. And from that point on, provide at least $65,000, $70,000 in scholarships in perpetuity. So that's something that one of our committees has done, and our other 2 committees are still actively working on their projects. So to summarize, the association is governed by a board of directors, which meets 1 time a year and operationally only exercise these Article 5 powers. The association is run on a day-to-day basis by an executive committee composed of the ex officio board members. The executive committee meets at least 4 times a year during the months of January, April, July, and December, although I'm sure that our president and other officers will tell you that they meet on a much more constant basis. Well, that ends the first part of my delivery. And so you will now hear from our vice president, soon to be president-elect, Richard Rice, who will tell us about the officers. And then when he's finished, he'll be followed by Joel Caldwell, our parliamentarian, soon to be vice president. Okay, Richard, take it over, please.
All right. Well, thank you, Judge Verin, for those remarks and for the initial overview. As you said, Richard Rice, public interest attorney, current VP for the Magic City Bar Association. And I'll be speaking with you about Article 6 and Article 7, which specifically relates to the officers and their duties. And I'll just try to keep the remarks as brief as possible. And as Judge Verin stated earlier, obviously the best source is the bylaws, so make sure that you maintain a copy of those to get the full details and specifics on each one of these positions. And I'll just be providing a brief overview today. As previously discussed, in terms of the designated officers, there are 9 designated officers, which would include the chairman of the board as well, which also would include the officers, the ex officio officers, which would be 8 members. And so what I'll do is walk through the qualifications, which would include for any one of those officers to be elected, you would need to be a regular member, judicial council member, or retired member in good standing. And for the positions of president, VP, or president-elect, those members would need to have been in good standing for 3 consecutive years prior to coming into that role. Judge Verin previously touched on this as well, but the election of those officers, they're all elected by the association's membership during the annual meeting. Of course, as it relates to the line of succession, including the president-elect, and the VP, those individuals, would automatically succeed into those roles. So that portion wouldn't be covered into the elected portion of that. And of course, the chairman of the board would be elected by the board at the annual meeting and not by the association membership. The term that was previously covered as well, but just briefly, in general, each one of those members would serve a 1-year term. The Magic City Bar representative would serve a 2-year term, and no one term of an officer shall exceed 3 years, which was previously stated. As far as how resignation or vacancies would be created, if any one of the officers wants to resign, they can be done in writing. Of course, that could be done upon the death or a declaration that an officer is disqualified or incapable, which would create a vacancy. If that position was for the president, then the VP would assume that role. But if it was any other board, if it was any other position, then the board would appoint, except for the president-elect, the vice president, the parliamentarian. If any one of those positions became vacant, then there would be a special election that would be held within 60 days of that vacancy being created. In order to remove any of the elected officials, it will require a 2/3 affirmative vote of the entire membership at any special meeting call. But first must have at least 6 board members to sign a petition of removal, and that should be done for the sole purpose of what's in the best interest of the association. And that letter would be served upon the subject of that potential removal within 5 days, at least 5 days prior to any special call meeting. If the board declares any other remaining officers are disqualified or incapable, then they would only be removed when it's in the best interest of the association, but that could be done by vote of the board as well. In terms of executing documents and obligating the association, this is something that was touched on by Judge Verin as well, but within the limitations that are set out, the treasurer and the president would be required to sign any type of checks or endorse any type of obligations as it relates to financial commitment. If it were a contract or a lease, then the president would be able to sign that individually, but that would require the resolution of the board or the executive committee to be attached to that. And that would be depending upon the length or the term of the contract and the overall financial obligation created thereby. As to the duties, this is Article 7 of the bylaws. The chairman of the board is essentially going to have broad powers and shall have all the duties incident to that office, which will be prescribed by the bylaws and as assigned by the board from time to time as well. Of course, the chairman of the board would preside over all board meetings as well. I should put that in. The president would preside at all meetings of the association and the executive committee. He would generally appoint the chairperson and members of all committees of the association. President would serve in an ex officio role for all of those committees as well, and would supervise and manage, oversee performance of all of the activities subject to the bylaws and the board and executive committees as well. The president would have a duty to keep the board and the executive committee informed of what those day-to-day decisions would entail and what other type of opportunities or potential risks may be relevant to the association, and would have a duty to carry out what the program and the overall vision that has been implemented or laid out for that particular year. As for the president-elect, one of the primary objectives or duties within that term is to go ahead and put in place or commit to writing an overall strategy and plan of action for when the president-elect becomes the president. The president-elect would also chair the nominations committee and presides over meetings of the associations in the president's absence as well. As for the VP, the vice president, in that position, the member would aid the president in performing the duties that were laid out, preside at association meetings and executive committee meetings when the president and the president-elect are not available, and report and supervise all of the committees. Report to the executive committee what the interactions are of each one of those committees, and would supervise those committees as well. The parliamentarian would monitor the meetings and other proceedings in compliance with the Alabama Nonprofit Corporation Law and with the bylaws, and would preside over meetings in the absence of the president, the vice president, and the president-elect. The parliamentarian would also have the ultimate word in determining what propriety of any type of dispute. If that became an issue, there was a dispute during a meeting at the president's direction, the parliamentarian would then have the authority to then to resolve or settle that. For the recording secretary, in that role, the individual would be responsible for maintaining meetings, minutes at any of the association meetings and also executive committee meetings, and would be the custodian of the board records. The corresponding secretary basically serve as a liaison between the association's members, the association itself, and the members in terms of retention and maintenance of record keeping, in terms of what activities the association is involved in and how the members can get involved and stay engaged with those types of things. The treasurer would maintain accurate, true records of all of the monies appropriated to and expended for the purpose of the association. The treasurer would make deposits on behalf of the association and in the financial institutions that are approved by the executive committee. and would also monitor all accounts and records related to financials and confirm that those are accurate, and would be responsible for providing reports on current and proposed financial decisions to the executive committee as well. There would also be a financial report that would be presented at the annual meeting that would be required from the treasurer as well. As for the Magic City Bar representative, this individual would basically be specifically referenced in the Birmingham Bar Association's bylaws, and would effectively be a member of the executive committee of the Birmingham Bar, the Birmingham Bar's executive committee, or potentially with the community, excuse me, or also with the Birmingham Bar Foundation. And essentially in that role, you'll be serving as a liaison between the Magic City Bar Association and the Birmingham Bar Association. You would keep records of all of the minutes and whatnot from the Birmingham Bar Association minutes, and there would be a requirement to have quarterly reports back to the Magic City Bar Association of those meetings, and potentially report back on any type of joint projects or any type of collaborative efforts that are ongoing. And as previously stated, in this role with the Magic City Bar representative, that the term would be for 2 years in that situation. In addition to serving with the Birmingham Bar Association, there would also be an opportunity to serve with the Birmingham Bar Foundation as well, following that initial 2-year term. And the last section in Article 7 is reserved for compensation of employees, and the board or the executive committee, depending upon the value of that obligation to the employee, would have the authority to pay employees of the association a reasonable rate for the services provided that would be consistent with the rates that other similar nonprofits would pay for that type of work. And I think I'll conclude there and pass it to Joel Caldwell, who will now speak to the committees for the association.
Thank you, Richard. And once again, thanks everyone for joining us for the CLE. Like Richard said, I'm Joel Caldwell. I practice law at Corey Watson Attorneys, where we do all personal injury law. And I currently serve as a parliamentarian of the Magic City Bar Association. And Judge Verin has already spoken about the exec committee. So I'm going to discuss the other committees, which is Article 8 of the bylaws. And so briefly, I'll touch each committee. First committee I want to mention is the nominations committee. The nominations committee recommends to the board and the Magic City Bar members, those persons to serve as directors and officers of the association. And the president-elect serves as the chairman of the nominations committee, and the nominations committee may nominate one member in good standing for each office or position that is eligible. The next committee, I will discuss the Members Relations Committee. And the Member Relations Committee is to provide assistance and advice to the board and the exec committee for the following matters. Number one is increasing the Magic City Bars Association membership. Second one is planning and conducting an annual scholarship banquet. We all know how important that is, how amazing it is, and how useful it is to law students as we help to further their education. Next thing the Member Relations Committee does is plan and conduct membership meetings and social events, because we all like to see each other's face. And although COVID has kind of put a damper on that, that's still a big thing the Members Relations Committee does. Finally, the Member Relations Committee plans and conducts continuing legal education events such as the one you're attending today. And the president of the association selects the members of the Members Relations Committee. The next committee is the Community Relations Committee, and the Community Relations Committee is to provide assistance and advice to the board and the exec committee concerning community legal education efforts, publicity for the association and media relations, next, technology and social media efforts, and finally, the Community Relations Committee plans and conducts volunteer opportunities within the community, and being just out there promoting the Magic City Bar Association, helping out the legal community. And as you guessed it, the president of the association selects the members for this committee as well. And finally, the last committee is the Long Range Planning Committee. And the Long Range Plan Committee provides assistance and advice to the board and the exec committee for developing plans and proposals for the future growth and operation of the board, which Judge Verin kind of alluded to earlier, and as well as evaluating the potential need for amendments to the bylaws. And the president selects the members for this committee as well. And if there are any vacancies for any of the committees, a person may be elected or selected to fill the vacancy of a committee. And I want to keep everyone aware of the fact that these committees, although they're present, we also have the opportunity to have other committees. And so if we see there's a need for other committees, the board by resolution can create such committees as it deems necessary to promote the work of the association. And that's pretty much it for my presentation. So I'll turn it over to Judge Verin. Thank you all.
Well, thank you both. I really want to thank Joel and Richard. I told them that there's no way that I wanted to do this very exciting presentation by myself for an hour. And so they graciously agreed to help me out with this. I'm going to just highlight a couple of things, and then I'll ask Chris to join us. And in terms of the obligations of what needs to be done, I think one of the most important things is that Article 5, Section 3, last paragraph, states that the first order of business of the duly appointed executive committee shall be the development of a proposed budget and calendar of events or agenda for the upcoming year, which shall be presented to the membership during the month of January. And like I said, we are transforming into these new bylaws, and these are not aspirational. These are what we're supposed to do, and we'll get there. I know that that Chris has told me that he wants to develop a procedure manual, like I want to do as well. And we'll be getting together to assist our future officers in those endeavors. But in order for, we have to realize that we operate on a calendar basis. That means that the president-elect has got to do a lot of work before he starts on January the 1st. And this would include selecting his committee chairs, thinking about who he's going to nominate, the budget, the calendar of events, the scholarship ball, picking these people that will help him out formulate these plans so that when they are official on January the 1st, he can appoint these people to these things. The committees can have their meetings prior to the January executive committee. Everything gets flushed out in January, and then the calendar of events, budget, and all that is put out to the membership. Now, that's in accordance with the bylaws. That's what should be done. Some things, of course, they can't do in January. For instance, we will have a scholarship, annual scholarship banquet, which usually entails more than $10,000. So you've got to wait until the April board meeting. And Chris and I have coordinated that, and Sidney and I have already talked about how we're going to do that, so that those items can be dealt with. And I'm going to close out. I've got about 35 more minutes of presentation, and I'm going to close it out in about 2 minutes and ask Chris and Sidney to join us, if that's okay. But during the board meeting in April, let me kind of review what kind of things are done and are mandated. We entertain a report from our standing committee, a standing audit committee. Judge Price did that for us last year. He did a fantastic job. Don't tell him this, but I'm going to ask him to do it again. And I will offer him some kind of remuneration. I'll buy him a bottle of whatever he wants to drink or something to entice him to do that for us next year. But we get the audit committee's report, the nominations committee report as to our new board members and to the board chairperson. We entertain reports from those other 3 committees that I told you about. Capital funding, building executive director. And then the president of the association would make his report in terms of what's going on with the association and would make any requests to the full board pursuant to any Article 5 action that needs to be done to request funds for the banquet and so forth. I would then conclude the meeting by giving my reports regarding other matters that are mandated by the bylaws and state law, which would entail document retention, conflicts of interest, and whistleblower concerns. So that by the end of that board meeting, everybody, leadership should know where we're going. The executive committee would already have known that because they would have completed their first meeting in January to give the association an overview of what the association should be doing. And this gives a very brief overview of how we operate, things that are mandated by law, and one overreaching thing that every officer and board member needs to keep in mind is our 501c3 tax exempt status, and to ensure that none of the activities that we plan to engage in will run afoul of that and risk our tax exempt status from being revoked. So at this point, I'd like to ask Chris, and I think Sidney is here, our incoming president, and just ask them if they have any comments that they would like to make concerning their experiences with managing a association of this size, and anything else that they would like to say. So, Mr. President.
Thank you, Judge Verin. I want to first thank Judge Verin, Richard Rice, and Joe Caldwell for your input today, and thanks for being here, for the time and the sacrifice that you guys have made to be here. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate you all giving the overview of the Magic City Bar and how it relates to actually what's just good governance as it relates to nonprofits in general. You got to remember that although this is a leadership forum, that there is a CLE component as well. And so that part is very important. So, but just to kind of echo some of the things that Judge Verin was saying, it's very important that we always remember first and foremost that this is a nonprofit organization and that there are certain rules and regulations that govern how we govern this organization. So we always want to be mindful of that. I would advise everyone to make sure that you're familiar with Title 10. I think it is Title 10 of the Alabama Code as it relates to things that nonprofits can or cannot do. Also IRS regulations as it relates to the specifically to the tax exempt or 501c3 tax exempt rules. So those are probably the biggest things that I would recommend that people know. Also, just from I guess a common sense standpoint, just remember that there are ethical considerations as well that go into any type of leadership position, be it with the Magic City Bar or any other organization that you may get involved with. So just, I always tell people that, I'm the only person who earned my law license, and I'm the only person that can give it away. So I always try to keep that at the forefront of my mind when I'm making decisions about things that I'm doing as it relates to the practice of law, transacting business, or especially with leading the organization. So that's really all that I have. And as we are now winding down, I'm going to give Sidney the last word. But before I do that, I just want to do what I've been doing for all the CLEs this morning. And I want to remind everyone once again that this is now the time to go ahead and renew your Magic City Bar membership. If you're not already a current member, go ahead and renew your membership. We would love to have you for the 2021 year. We need as many hands on deck as we can because it is very important that we continue to do the work for which the Magic City Bar was founded. Secondly, I want to remind everyone that this is being recorded and we have applied for CLE credit. So in order to get CLE credit, you have to attest that you attended the CLE virtually. And I will put a link into the chat section. And also you will receive an email asking you for your feedback and to attest that you attended the CLE virtually. So with that, this is the 6th CLE that we have done today. It's been awesome, but I am tired. I'm getting ready. Last couple of notes for the annual meeting, but I just want to say thanks again for everyone for being here. Thanks again to our presenters. on this wonderful CLE panel and leadership forum. And I'm going to turn it over to our president-elect.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I'm kind of on the spot. I wasn't quite ready to say anything in this particular CLE. Am I going to get CLE credit for this? Speaker's credit? I'm just kidding. But real quick, again, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sidney Jackson. I am the incoming president of the Magic City Bar. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to really keep the momentum going and keep the Magic City Bar going in the right direction. I jotted down a couple of points as it relates to leadership. And I think they're points that we can use, especially if we're involved in organizations like the Magic City Bar or any other organizations of this size, particularly nonprofits. One of the first points that I'd like to point out as far as leadership capabilities or skills is you need to know your capabilities. Specifically, you need to know your strengths and you need to know your weaknesses. It's extremely important that as you move up and ascend in leadership, you know what you're good at. Because if you're not so good at one thing, you can certainly surround yourself with people that can make up your shortfalls in that particular area. There's no reason to try to prove yourself or do something that you may not necessarily have the proper expertise on, especially when you have a community such as the Magic City Bar with so many people that can do so many great things for the organization. So know your capabilities and shortfalls. And secondly, surround yourself with very knowledgeable people that can help you as you move forward and lead the organization. In addition to surrounding yourself with good, knowledgeable people, I think that communication in pretty much every aspect of life is key. It's particularly important when you're in charge of an organization such as the Magic City Bar Association. It's important that you maintain communication with those around you, the people in the executive committee, the board of directors, and also the general membership. You want to be as transparent as possible, and you want to let people know what you're doing because we are in charge of a large organization that can do a lot of good for a lot of people. So we want to be sure that we're using our resources as best as we can. In addition to communicating and being as transparent as possible, it's really, you guys may think that, I'm not being facetious, but quite simply, do the right thing. I mean, it's about as simple as it gets, but each one of us know what's right and what's wrong, especially when we're in charge of either monetary funds or in charge of creating initiatives for community outreach or whatever it may be. Do the right thing and good things will follow. Those are the points that I jotted down that I think are particularly important. There are 5 points. Again, I'll go over them again. Know your capabilities and shortfalls. Surround yourself with knowledgeable, good people. Communicate a lot. Be transparent and also do the right thing. Thank you.
Well, guys, I don't see any questions, and we are running close on time. We are about to start our annual meeting at 6 o'clock, and everyone should have already received a link for that. That will be presented in a different format, which will be it'll be in the meeting format so that everyone can give input and all those things. But we are now going to end this particular CLE. Thanks again for attending. Don't forget to don't forget to renew your membership and invite 5 friends to renew their membership or join as well. Thanks again for being here. Everyone have a great day. Look forward to seeing you at the annual meeting.